Good afternoon. Welcome to our webinar. The title is Understanding the Potential Impact Hidden in the Nature of Quality 4.0. And we're going to talk about Quality 4.0, a topic that's getting a lot of attention these days since about the last 4 years, since before that there was no Quality 4.0. So it's a new idea that's coming to the quality community, and we need to examine it objectively to understand what is the impact that it has on the way we have been conducting our jobs as quality professionals. You know, Dr. Juran in 1997, in his what was called his last speech, and he said this was the next century, this 21st century, will be the century of quality. And this is actually what we're trying to develop now. We're trying to create a century of quality. As we start taking a look at it, so far we haven't done a very good job. But Quality 4.0 promises an awful lot of capability for the future. However, at the same time that Juran said this, Stephen Hawking said in 1997, the 21st century will be the century of complexity. And now this is the challenge we are having to face with this digital transformation happening that's being called Quality 4.0. And so Juran, though, he was not really an optimist. In 1966, right after his book Managerial Breakthrough was written, he gave a speech at the European Organization for Quality Congress in Madrid, Spain. And this is what he had to say. He said, "My gloomy prognosis is that we in the West will spend the rest of the century getting fully on top of the quality crisis." So what was the quality crisis? At that point in time, it was that American businesses were actually blasé. They didn't really care about quality. They only wanted quantity. They were still coming out of the World War II effect where people would buy anything because there was not enough supply to meet demand. And then he said, even that pace will not be realized if we continue to try to solve basic management problems by clever exhortations, do it right the first time, he would say from Crosby, or by narrow techniques, use this tool. And now, what are we doing today? Are we using clever exhortations or are we using narrow techniques? What is it that's capturing the imagination that stirs the need for change? Well, it's time for inquiring minds to inquire and face some hard questions about our future, the future of the profession, and how it will develop as we face the years to come. Now, we talk about vision, we talk about the future, we talk about all of these things. And there's 4 questions that I want to address today. The first is, what is the future of quality in the age of the smart machine? Shoshana Zuboff wrote a book about the age of the smart machine in the late 1970s. And it talked about this digital transformation moving to computer systems and how they were being distributed as networks in organizations, allowing whole new levels of productivity and collaboration among people using data. The second question is, what must we do to transform quality into Quality 4.0? Well, we have to recognize there really was never a Quality 3.0. There was a variety of different things that never got consolidated properly. We had Lean, we had Six Sigma, we had ISO standards, we had marketing quality, we had lots of R&D types of quality efforts, we had DMAIC, we had DMADV, we had PDCA, we had SD. There was a whole hodgepodge of things. So how can we say what Quality 4.0 is when we never really had a solid foundation of Quality 3.0? So it's not an evolutionary change, it's a revolutionary change. And the next thing we see is, how can we shape what we will become as quality professionals? Well, we have to examine what is that revolutionary change that's going to happen. Are we prepared to be the revolutionaries? You know, do we have our muskets, so to speak, like the Minuteman militia, so we can shoot people? Are we going to be that type of revolutionary? Do we have the right tools and methods? Do we have the right competence? Can we get things on target with those new technologies? Can we guide other people and help them to understand how they will be the soldiers in that new future of war to create that level of quality? And the fourth question, is this really what we need to become over the long term? Are we going to be just digital folks in the long term? Totally changing our ways of working, totally changing our ways of collaboration, just to serve the nature of zeros and ones in digital technology. What will be the role of the people? What will be the role of the process? What will be the role of management reporting and strategic development? How will all of those things come to bear if we just interpret the narrow sense of digital quality? Let's begin. When we see, there's a question. What are the technology trends that are driving transformations in this current state of organizations that have a near-term effect on quality? And these are things that are challenging us today in many organizations. And we start seeing, first of all, we're able to put digital sensor detection systems, sensors in place. And those signal detector sensors tell us about the high quality information about what's happening in various performance characteristics, physical characteristics about process. We were never able to see those before, at least not inexpensively. So for instance, temperature probes that used to cost around 10,000 US dollars now are less than $1 US. And so we can start seeing that there has been a significant shift over the last 20 years in not only the pricing and the availability, but also the scale and frequency of data transmission. The second, we see mass storage and data historians. We see that there is cloud storage, we see there is solid state device storage, and we have ways of keeping track of lots of data. And we can go back and take a look what actually happened at very rapid sampling rates. So process change can be seen in real time. Third, we have digital communication channels. We can put a wireless network in place in the workplace and then capture all of this information to a central location and process it concurrently about the whole system. It used to be we could only do that in major construction sites where we had that all together. Like for instance, in a nuclear power facility where there was a control room that managed all of those sensors together. That was expensive to do. In an oil refiner, we'd had a control room where all of the sensors and processes for that was expensive to do. Now we can do this, if you will, very readily with 5G wireless technologies. We also see big data and predictive analytics. And this allows us to take advantage of lots of data streams coming together, pulling to move an organization. And we're changing not only in speed and variety and the accessibility, but all of those are changing all at once everywhere. Predictive analytics is saying we can use these techniques to be able to understand how do those data sources operate together and what do they mean about future implications for the performance of the overall system. Machine learning applications. Here we can actually take a look at those patterns that we are able to observe, and we can start seeing what are those patterns that are repetitive that we haven't been able to see before. We can take a look at signal strength and compare it to noise. We can integrate out the noise factors, which enhances the signal. So we can process things in a very different way and understand what are those implications for the diagnostics of process performance. We can have an artificial intelligence algorithm that can make decisions based on those data streams. And then we can start saying, we've learned about the past. Here's a comparison of what the process is doing. Here's how we want it to improve. So the system can learn, we can then choose and then recognize we have to do something different. So the choice can actually be automated by the system, and it takes over that thinking process for how to make improvements happen. Robotic control systems. We can have then a feedback loop from the AI system saying, if it's doing that based on this predictive analytics, we need to do this to control that actual process activity. And that is connecting then the signals to a robotic control system that allows us to say, let's change the mixture, let's change the sequence, let's change this timing. Whatever those features are that we're monitoring, that allows us to get the system back to the state of control that we'd like it to have. And then we have quantum computing. It's not here yet, but it's coming. But what we see is that microprocessing speeds are becoming much, much faster. So we're having multiple activities happening on the technology side. We have more storage, more accessible storage that we can get a hold of real time, and the processing speed of the computers is increasing so that we can actually get more information processed at once with finer degrees of detail, more data integrity, and more analytic capability to see micro distinctions in process performance. And this graphic sort of tells it all. It appears as if we have gone into the black hole, if you will, of digital technology. So what does this actually mean as we start looking ahead? Well, what is the current state of technological maturity and how is it affecting change? Well, you've heard the saying before, I'm sure, we don't know what we don't know. If anybody's been in Six Sigma training, I'm sure you've heard that. Now that was actually Confucius in the Analects about 500 BC, but we still have the same problem. There are many things that are unknown in our system. And what we'd like to do with digital technology is to let it observe the system at finer levels of detail, use pattern recognition and understanding how we put things together to develop rules for how we can have the logic structure that runs a productive system better than we can just with manual analyses. So quality professionals today are mired in their traditional methods and tools that were developed in an analog age of univariate statistics, looking at one quality characteristic at a time. We had processes for problem investigation, root cause inquiry, that were based on that. And we had work documentation that's currently being made obsolete by digital technologies. The capability of digital technologies changed the way all of those capabilities that we've used in the past in an analog world can work today. Now they can be done with much better fidelity and much better intensity and much better predictability. Generally speaking, the technology shift is being managed by engineers and data science or information technology specialists, while the community of quality professionals is only engaged on the periphery, if at all. So maybe we have to do some process maps to give them, or something like this, or provide documentation. But they're the ones who are in the decision-making seat driving these things. Whoever sets master data for the ERP system and how you define that actually constrains how you can do analysis in that digital age, because that's how you actually transform sensor data into operational data about process performance. We also see technology advances are increasing exponentially. So rapidly growth that we have to stay on top of them just to understand. And that is a full-time job in itself. And the environment of digital solutions is becoming polluted by chaotic, immature applications. How do you choose between the various different types of dashboards, presentation systems, analysis skills, software languages, and applications that are coming at an ever-increasing pace and being asked, if you will, in the business, will you buy me? Do you buy into this technology? And they're promising everything. So the desire to control the shift is causing major management consultancies to leap into the fray and claim the implications for operations management. So they want to be able to say, we can manage your system. We can tell you, Mr. Executive or Ms. Executive, how you should actually make your capital investments, which digital technologies will help you. And in a recent McKinsey article that just came out last week, they say that we will help you do this, and the solution will be reduced cost of quality and reduced supplier cost, and we'll get that because we're going to charge the suppliers back for reparations. Forget the idea of fixing things, we're just going to make the suppliers pay. That was the old solution that Volkswagen tried years ago, and all that does is drive suppliers into bankruptcy if we don't help them eliminate the problems. So it's basically saying we're willing to live with quality and bad quality, and we'll pass off the obligation or responsibility from our organization, which is responsible for engineering products or services given to our customers, back to the supplier, and we'll slap their hands financially. And that's not a good solution. It's time for quality professionals to get smarter about what these smart technologies are actually able to do and what sort of value they deliver to our organizations. So preemptive education of the quality community can be an answer to create our technological astuteness for what we need to do as the future comes. Well, how do we navigate this digital highway towards the future? How do we get through all of those different things? So many things to learn about. And most of us are not engineers. I happen to be one. But even as I look at those things, I remember when I was learning about electrical systems, it wasn't the digital systems, it was analog systems, it was through-hole technology, and so forth. And all of that was totally different than the age we're living in today. I was very fortunate. I was working with artificial intelligence in the 1970s in my military career. But that was brute force AI. It wasn't an algorithm embedded in something, doing something independent of my programming. It wasn't learning independent of the human being. The human beings had to understand what needed to be done through research and putting it together, and then we had to code the algorithm. Then you could have pattern recognition. Excuse me. So what are the implications for quality professionals of these trends? Well, many quality professionals will need to make what is called a reciprocal adjustment to make this new technology relevant to their organizations. What does this mean? This means that the quality professionals need to become more technologically astute. We have to understand the technology. We have to understand what it means. How does it apply? And the technology needs to incorporate humanity in its purpose, so quality is making life better as comprehensive and inclusive activities are given to benefit all of humanity, not just the management system, but the people who are living in that system and the people who will be living through this transition as we move to a digital age. So the role of quality organizations or specialists will broaden as inspection and audit functions are substituted using automated testing, supplemented by artificial intelligence. Many companies are doing such diagnostics today in a routine system. Feedback loops, cybernetic feedback loops, are then adding corrections without people involved in the loops. So quality professionals will need to focus instead on such areas as designing future work systems and software systems that are operable in this automated world, facilitating human projects that create goodness throughout society, and providing deep data analytics and problem solving that will continue to be required to assure our world remains constantly evolving towards a better place to live. And so what we're going to be doing is upping our game. But this approach is just describing a technologically astute requirement. It's not resolving any of the other problems that exist in this transformation. So we have to think, what do we really mean by Quality 4.0? It's too easy to become overwhelmed with the technology and forget the humanity. So Quality 4.0 is not a new quality program. It is not a quick fix or a patch that can just be added on something old. It's not just technology transformation. It's not just a cost-saving strategy or an incremental improvement. And it's not an excuse for right-sizing or downsizing the people out of an organization. And it is also not just another tool for your quality toolkit. Quality 4.0 requires profound knowledge. Deming talked about this. He says it's appreciation for a system, understanding how statistics and probability affect performance of processes, understanding the role of people, humanity in there, and particularly relative to people, what is the role of psychology or how people think and act and their spirit in work? What is the emotional intelligence, not just the digital intelligence? It also requires this humanized technology. That was a phrase that was created at Nokia in the 1990s. And the idea was that technology and humanity need to be blended together. How do we use technology in a way that amplifies people, and how do we use people in a way that actually reflects improvements in what technology can do to deliver value? We have to develop technological astuteness. It has to have a strong process focus. We have to design this into the system through engineering. We have to implant digital sensors in a distributed process. And we have to integrate this with the overall information systems so that we can understand the planning as well as the operational function and the feedback loops and the management controls that makes it all work. So what we see is Quality 4.0 is a catalyst. It is a disrupting technology and is disrupting industry in a way that has vast future implications. So we have to envision Quality 4.0 social impacts beyond the digital transformation that we are experiencing today. So what do we mean by quality when we say Quality 4.0? Do we mean the old definitions of quality? Well, no, it's new. It's totally different than what we've had before. So how should we think about quality in this emerging digital age? And so we have an evolved definition for quality in terms of the meaning of quality with respect to humanity, a larger system, not the microcosm of just one firm or one organization or a factory or a service organization or an R&D firm, but how does it work for the world? So we have to define quality in a broader way so it's applicable to all human actions. So conforming to specific customer requirements or satisfying target customers are actually compromising objectives in this larger picture, as we can satisfy one set of requirements or the expectation of a single customer and we start creating problems for others. This is a wicked problem. And that means that we can't actually get all the solutions at once, and there are complications that we don't understand, what we call unintended consequences. So how do we prioritize what should be accomplished by our efforts in using the world's resources? Well, the definition I use is that quality is a concurrent pursuit of goodness and the avoidance of badness. That definition has its roots back, going all the way back to Aristotle, who proposed it as an ethical principle. If quality is the highest good, it should do no harm, just like the medical oath doctors take. And that means creating quality of life for all humanity, creating excellence in the environment in which we live, not just in the products that we make or the services that we deliver. So the principle is contained in most national and ethical cultures. It's not a foreign concept to the way humanity expresses value. But this fundamental shift causes us to consider what we do from very different perspectives. So quality must provide benefits to all humanity, and it must be egalitarian in the distribution of those benefits so everyone improves the quality of their lives. So there's a question that comes up. Is this Quality 4.0 a black swan, or is it a wicked problem? Now, many of you may have heard of Nicholas Taleb's book, The Black Swan. And he wrote that about the problems that happen when we get caught up in average-based statistics. And we start looking at everything as if it was a normal distribution. And that's fundamentally what many of us have done in our performance and the way we've looked at things in the past. Control charts, X bar R, X bar S charts, look at everything as a normal distribution. And they create the normal distribution by applying the central limit theorem. So what is a black swan? So a black swan is an event that's a statistical outlier. In other words, it's excessive variation. It's beyond what we see. That's the type 1 test on a control chart. Second is it has extreme impact or consequences. So that is a high risk, high impact severity. And third, in retrospect or in hindsight, it's highly explainable. We know what, oh my gosh, that happened, but we didn't do anything about it. And so here's the problem if we can't anticipate it. We created the black swan by only allowing us to understand what was observable. So the idea is if we only observed a white swan, then the existence of the black swan may be totally incomprehensible. This idea, Taleb saw, he has a little history of it, but most people relate it back to the work of Karl Popper in his book, Conjectures and Refutations, where he says, well, it's just as unlikely as having a black swan. But actually, there was a black swan in Australia. And once we see that rather ugly bird, we start understanding things are different. Now, there's another type of problem that we can have. It's called a wicked problem. And a wicked problem has certain characteristics. It has no definite problem definition. What's the definition for Quality 4.0 problem? It has no stopping rule. When are you done implementing Quality 4.0? It has no immediate test of solutions. How do you know you've done Quality 4.0 well? There are no well-defined set of solutions. How do you actually do Quality 4.0 for this factory? And solutions are relative to situations. Well, I have to do it for this machine, injection molding machine, differently than that pharma tableting machine or coding machine. And solutions are going to be, if you will, essentially unique, no matter what the application is. And every solution will have some consequences, either in the local system or the greater system for society. And the problem is that each wicked problem becomes a symptom of another wicked problem. If I get this little cell right for Quality 4.0 technologies, what I start finding out is I throw the whole cell into imbalance. When we started buying these numerically controlled machining and manufacturing centers, what happened is that Accounting people say you've got to keep running it so we get the payback and we can actually have an efficient operating machine. So they loaded those and produced more inventory than the system needed. We create a problem by actually introducing the technology because the system does not comprehend how to maximize its performance. And we also see that causes in a wicked problem can be explained in various ways based on interpretations. So I come and I interpret the problem as a finance person and I get one view. I come and I interpret it as a manufacturing engineer, I get another view. I come and I interpret it as an inspector, I get another view. If I come and I interpret it as a person who's working in the process, a worker, I get another view. But the problem about wicked problems, and perhaps the worst one, is that management expects the solution to be right and cost effective. Now, it's not true and false, a problem like this. It's good and bad. It's degrees of gray. If not 50, maybe 150. But what we start seeing is there's different levels at which we can do these, and the maturity of that system, it's not a switch that you can make it say right or wrong, or do an audit and say you did it right or you did it wrong. We really have to get in and understand it. And this is the problem. If we start saying everything is black and white, like the Swan, we have to be comprehensive and start thinking, what about this? Solutions may be neither black nor white, but maybe it's a hybrid integrated combination. And that, my friends, is a black-necked white swan from a zoo in Santiago, Chile. So, in times of doubt, we should question everything. And that means be skeptical. Be curious. Think about what you need to do. So my favorite haiku is, do not seek to follow in the footsteps of the old masters. Don't do what they exactly did, but seek instead what they sought. What were they trying to accomplish in their day, in their age, with their technology? And then how do we fast forward those things they were trying to accomplish to our day with our technologies and our problems? Because they're two different states. So the next question I have is, how does this definition, what does it imply for quality approaches in a multinational corporation, an MNC, or in a micro to small and medium enterprise, MSME? And so we see Quality 4.0 is substantially different and unique from prior to concepts that started with large companies and then basically trickled down to the small ones. We also see Quality 4.0 requires significant investment. It's capital intensive, which may become a barrier for the micro to SME organizations to implement. Thus, the ability of the small companies to offer the competitive market an equivalent cost structure may be substantially decreased in the future, which will threaten their existence and their capacity for sustainability of their business. So micro to SME organizations must be selective in their choice of technologies to accept, the degree to which this technology is embraced, and in the targeting of selected applications which provide advantages that deliver increased efficiency while also remaining austere in terms of capital investment requirements. So do not blindly follow, if you're in a micro to SME, the example of a multinational corporation in adapting technologies in the fervent hopes of returns. Plan your strategy so it's appropriate for fit for your intended purpose. Now, what design principles help to establish a Quality 4.0? So Quality 4.0 requires that the productive system be engineered as a component of the end-to-end business system. But it is, in most cases, only bolted on as an option. So we're going to have it here in this system. We can invest and do that just for this one piece of equipment. And we got some savings. But was that the best place for us to do this? Was this the right place to get the benefit? We have to study this. So what we have to do in our system is understand what are the critical quality characteristics of the process deliverables. What's the limit of this performance required by targeted customers as compared to those that are available from competitive market offerings? So are we actually up to snuff when it comes to what the other companies that we compete head-to-head with are delivering to customers? Then we have to define the end-to-end flow of the productive process with careful consideration to standard work requirements, technology enablers, measurement control points in process performance monitoring the flow, and throughput quality characteristics. In other words, the measurement checkpoints and control points where we can observe and then actually change the way that process is operating. We have to then build an end-to-end system model of those components and determine where and how technology can increase efficiency, reduce cost, and improve quality. And then we have to prioritize digital investments based on the need of individual systems items as components, or determine if a redesign of the entire system is warranted. Will it require local digitization of production equipment or redesign of the whole production process as an entire state? So Quality 4.0 considerations must be greater, more comprehensive and inclusive in scope and related to all dimensions of organizational performance, and not restricted only to the technological dimensions. In other words, it must be fit for the purpose of the firm. So, what are the grand challenges we face? How will these implications of this digital transformation affect society at large? Will increased automation have any environmental effects on quality of air, water, and soil, which are necessary of life, for life of humans? Will the current ever-diminishing engineering scale of material science, i.e. moving down to the nanotechnology scale, will that create unintended consequences for human health, as in microplastics? Will increased automation lead to more waste in packaging materials that are polluting the Earth's landfills and also our oceans? Will distribution of financial benefits unevenly flow in society to those who are financially elite and provide the capital for investment over the classes of the workers who are only providing their labor or the suppliers? And how will society maintain a supportive infrastructure in education so people can advance in their knowledge, transportation systems, power systems, provision of essential services? If social economic benefits are distributed in the same way that they've been done in the past, we'll start seeing that these support systems no longer are actually capable of growing with the technological capabilities. So here's a question. What would Genichi Taguchi have to say about this deployment of Walter Shewhart's level of maximum control over the productive system? Remember, Shewhart talks about quality is the lost once it's given to society. And the highest level of control that Shewhart talked about was maximum production or maximum control, where everything could be controlled like in an engineering control system. Well, what are the downsides, those unintended consequences of Quality 4.0? Well, we see that the technological advance is insufficient. We have to have advances in social systems for the benefit of humanity. This is needed to offset income disparities created from the automation of work of people. Second is the social cost of Quality 4.0 may indeed exceed the shareholder benefits. So we get some marginal benefits for shareholders, but then we destroy the society in which those products and services are made, and that we no longer can actually continue to operate that society the way we've done in the past. So the question is, how can the people survive? So what should be the Quality 4.0 considerations for the human side of quality and its concern for the welfare of society and the quality of life for humanity? Well, if we take a look, we can ask this question a little bit more deeply. What are the costs to society of poor technological integration? How can the blind pursuit of Quality 4.0 destroy humanity? Or what's needed in an enlightened pursuit of quality for humanity? And so what we have to do is focus on external costs in multiple social dimensions, not just myopically on standard costs that are accounted for in the financial systems of a single company. We have to beware of inducing unexpected human costs of poor quality through creating frustration and stress on workers due to the uncertainty in their job status or the ability to develop competencies and skills for the new era, which leads to their demotivation, a reduction in enthusiasm, increased stress, and withdrawal from participation in the very thing we need, and that is engagement in the creative developments that drive continual improvement. And we have to evaluate new dimensions of risks that are engaged by introducing an immature technology and its capacity for inducing cybersecurity threats or privacy invasion of personnel records. And we have to understand also the ecological, environmental implications of all new technologies for their entire life cycle. So don't get trapped into thinking about purely financial justifications for choosing this technology approach. Consider the multidimensional cost to people also. So what is recommended to initiate standardization of Quality 4.0? Well, I think what I've tried to point out is that Quality 4.0 is basically a disruptive transitional state. It's not the end game. It does not describe the nature of the future state of quality or the direction of quality, which is going to be a much broader issue than just a technology transformation. So we have to develop quality community-wide agreement on an operational definition of the Quality 4.0 concept with purposeful direction as well as control limits or stages and how it's introduced over time so it's easier to comprehend. Not just this broad amorphous term that is either a wicked problem or a black swan because we can't really understand it the way it's been presented to us as what quality has to deliver. We have to identify specific use cases at the machine equipment level that may be used in the same way that the 7 basic quality tools and teamwork models were put into practice for manual systems of the tame problems of the past. They were not the wicked problems, they were problems that were univariate, they were common sense, and we just basically had to process our thinking in a linear way to get them understood. We also have to design career development pathways that enable quality professionals to take on educational activities that will prepare them for this new age and package all these programs in an easy-to-consume learning program that may be pursued by a distance learning, remote approach, but with human monitoring available. We can't leave out the human touch. That is an essential that people have an ability to understand and to reach to others and understand the human experience in the application of these things. And finally, we have to review the body of knowledge and transform it so it is prepared to be able to productively engage the new dimension without relying on old models that are questionable or no longer of particular relevance to the future state that we envision coming. So we have to also act with a sense of urgency. We cannot delay any further. Technology moves at what they call Silicon Valley time. And that's faster and faster and faster. It's ever accelerating. However, quality community tends to do just the opposite. We move at a slow pace and we ever decelerate as we seek to learn the nuts and bolts of everything that comes across us. We have to figure out how do we manage that disruptive condition between the rapid pace of technology and our inability to consume and understand this in such a fast flow of information and knowledge. So we have to learn to seek what the masters sought today. It's a brave new world. And that means discovering order in the midst of this chaotic world. And so, yeah, there is a sunset. But as we start taking a look at over time, what's actually happening? You know, what are all of those little pieces and how do they put together? Do they actually match the image we have of change happening in our world? Well, at this time, we're going to have a panel discussion. And what we're going to do in this panel discussion is going to start with 5 questions. And the first question is, there was a 1998 article in Quality Progress, Digital Hammers and Electronic Nails, and it forecasts the quality of the impact of this coming age of digital quality. So how far ahead in the future can we act today? What do you think we'll observe? How will it change? Second is, what do we need to plan both professionally for ASQ and strategically for corporate customers to prepare for change in the coming decades? Third, we referred to Duran's comment that the 21st century will be the century of quality. How do we ensure that strategic quality will become the focus of our executives to help this occur? Fourth, during this current digital transition, how do we ensure that fundamentals of quality and focus on people is not lost as a priority? And then finally, what are the opportunities that the current pandemic situation provides for quality professionals to currently advance their careers and prepare for this digital transition to Quality 4.0? So now we're going to turn the session over to our moderator, and we'll have an opportunity to the panelists to take on these questions and also perhaps some time to take some questions for you. Thank you very much.
So at this time, I'd like to turn the panel back to our moderator, Georgios. And I won't try your last name, but I remember your papa. So you're Giorgio Daddy, and you're going to take over and lead us from here.
Thanks a lot.
Yes.
Georgios, thank you. Just 1 second before I hand over. I mean, because we need to remind everybody that they have to place their questions in the Q&A box, and I'll be reading those for you if you need help. Dr. Greg, thank you very much. Georgios, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Greg. It was a really thoughtful and insightful presentation, and I take over especially the notion of the human dimension of the quality 4.0 and the digital transformation, because, you know, we tend to jump on the software solution, but to a certain extent we neglect the larger social dimension and human impact that this might have. That was an excellent point.
Thank you. And I'm going to stop sharing right now.
Okay.
So people can see our faces, I guess. Mm-hmm. Or I guess, Nancy, maybe you can take it back to Giorgio.
Sorry?
Can you take presenter away and give it to Giorgio?
Sorry, okay. 1 second.
Okay.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, going, as Nancy said, we can start recording your questions in the Q&A part, and we'll start our panel discussion with the 5 questions that Greg presented. And it's going to be like a dialogue among the other panelists, Dennis and Willie. So starting about the digital hammers and electronic nails. Well, that was kind of, let's say, insightful at that time, and was showing the future that was coming. It was like an article ahead of its time. But if we are talking now about the next 20 years, how do you see that future will be? Any ideas from our panelists?
If I may start, just
yes,
I'll hand it over. Of course, a lot has been said by Greg, but I think as a general rule, I see a few shifts happening. And the first shift is a shift away from operations to earlier steps in the process, which means design and development and marketing. So that's one shift I do see that's going to happen, because of course technology will be able to take over a lot of the requirements of pure product quality. So that's one issue. And the second shift I see is a shift more from how towards what and why. Because the how is becoming extremely technological, and it's of course very interesting to get these technical people understand quality, and I think, in my view, this is more important than to get the quality people understand technology, which they need to do, but not into that depth. And what you will see, you know, if you set up a big data system, what quality should be focusing on is not how this system has to be put up technologically, but much more, why do we have the system? What questions would we want to see answered by that system? What data is necessary to gather? What needs to be the quality of that data? So much more a why and what versus a purely how. And a third issue is, I think, a shift more towards what I would call societal quality. You know, I've seen some slides from Toyota where they, you know, we all know Toyota as TPS as a model for lean and quality in general. But if you look at their view today, the view is much more towards how can we contribute to the societal problem of movement itself. So cars may be one answer, but there may be other answers, and we need to be a partner in solving societal problems, the functional issues of it. And things like Society 5.0 that you see in Japan very much link to that, I think. So this would be my, my first reaction to the question.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Billy. It was very thoughtful and insightful, your observation. But what I keep, it's the points on the what and why, which I believe it's the core of our quality profession, like the questions that we ask in order to move forward. I don't know, Dennis, would you have something to add on Billy's point?
Yes, first of all, Greg's presentation was great, and I was really delighted to hear him talk about a couple of things. And one was his pursuit of the quality of humanity. I mean, and I think Willie touched on too that we tend to think about Quality 4.0 as being about technology, and almost in a lot of what I've read, forgetting about the humanity being there as well, and the impact the quality can create. I thought, listen, 2020 has been a dramatic year, obviously, and it made me think of a few things, and these few things are personal. I remember maybe 10 years ago trying to get a young lady that had worked for me a remote job. Her husband was starting with the US military. She's going to be traveling around, but she wanted to continue in quality management, but it was going to be tricky. She was going to be moving around. And I was contacting colleagues and asking them about essentially remote working. And I was shocked at the response I got, which was a couple of people emailing and sort of half joking about, boy, I wish I could get a job like that. And but this was only 10 years ago, and the concept of remote working wasn't new at the time, but finding it was a different thing. Now, myself, a couple of years ago, I was in Montana. I'm from Ireland originally, and so 5 years ago, I moved back home for personal reasons, looking after family. But suddenly, in 2020, things have changed. And technology that even existed hadn't really been used to the full capacity. So, for example, I could have potentially stayed in Montana, done the job that I'm doing now because I'm working from home. But that concept couldn't even have been seriously discussed. I know people who, I'm in Ireland, a lot of Irish, like myself, travel, move for work. There's a chap who now lives nearby, who lived for 15 years in London, but he was working from home in London, and suddenly realized, well, if I could move back to my family in Ireland, I can just continue doing my work for this company in London. And the company said, yes, it really doesn't matter. Now, ask if its company had have considered that a month earlier, in January of 2020 or December of 2019, we would have said, well, that's just not going to work. So, I think there's a huge mind shift that has happened in 2020. And I think in some cases we have the technology available. We just need the mindset to use it. And it's also using the mindset in terms of our people. I also know a lot of businesses that are working remotely now. And again, prior to COVID, if you'd have said, can we have these people work from home? The answer would have been no, it's not going to work. I also know organizations that have fully embraced it now, but they went through a transition point in early 2020 where they honestly really didn't think people would do it. They'd sort of get up at 10 o'clock in the morning, they'd work for an hour, they'd have a 3-hour lunch break, whereas people actually are working harder now. There's less time in the car, they're not traveling to work, they're able to juggle their personal lives. So I think there's huge opportunities with the technology we have, the huge advances we're going to have in technology moving forward, allowing us to have a better quality of life and have definitely a more connected global, we talk about global economy, things are much more global now. So those are just some thoughts that popped to mind.
Georgios?
Yes, thank you, Dennis.
Maybe we can take one question from the attendees, or you prefer to wait till the end?
No, I'll take it now.
Okay. So this is from Pedro. He's saying, excellent presentation as always, is the case with Greg. His question is, what are the main new components that should become part of the body of knowledge for quality professionals that will be involved in Quality 4.0?
Nancy, I think that this question, we can answer it together with the fifth questions that we have already scheduled about the opportunities that the current pandemic situation have brought and what is needed for us as quality professionals, okay, to advance our career and prepare for the digital transition. I don't know, Greg, would you be so kind to take the lead and give us your point of view on that?
Excuse me. I think there are a number of things we have to do, and I just want to say, I think the comments by Willie and Dennis were right on. But I've been involved in ASQ future studies since 1993 when we started. 7 future studies, looking out. Originally, it was 10 years, then 20 years. We did some things good. We got some things like this digital hammers. We got the China economic shift before the economists called it, and so forth. So there were major things that we could study. But I've been looking out 20 years, but now I can't look out more than 5. There's so many things happening now. Now, Pedro, if this is the Pedro I'm thinking it is because of the question, I think this question is pretty insightful, because if I'm going to make a career change, am I going to invest in another PhD program, or do I need a micromaster's or just a master's degree or just a couple of spot-on seminars to get the topics down? And as I'm looking at it, what do we see happening? We see automation, but it's going to depend on industry by industry. So like in the automobile, for instance, right now, the ASQ automotive industry asked me to write about how Quality 4.0 is impacting them. The Toyota CRX has a digital backbone with over 60 sensors integrated into a multi-sensor processor that actually analyzes everything, sends signals out alerting to things, and then tells you what to do about them or corrects them itself. And so those are all very big changes happening in the system. And so as we're trying to understand how do we actually make that work, I think that that's a major problem, that we can't really understand and get it right. So first I'd say is get a technological background so you understand the language and the interpretation. Quality people probably will not become the engineers to make these happen, but we can become, if you will, the astute auditor. We can become if you will, coach and questioner. We can become the advocate for the human beings and the people in the process, or for society at large. And so my computer's trying to update. Silly computer. So this is what I think we have to think. We have to get ahead. There's an old saying: if you're going to go duck shooting, don't shoot behind the duck, shoot ahead of the duck. And somehow we have to figure out how do we aim for that point. There's a sweet spot, and if we don't get it, we're going home hungry.
Well, I actually think, Greg, along the lines of what you're saying, is that things become very flexible. So it's not as if I follow a fixed schedule and path and training course that I end up in the right direction, because the direction keeps changing. So it's really, lifelong learning, obviously, as it's said, but very flexible lifelong learning will be needed. And I also think that training institutes will need to think about that in these terms. And you need a fundamental base, but from that, as you say, things become so specialized and so different from area to area that you really have to have specific things for specific things. That's got to be very difficult to follow general guidelines or general training patterns, I think.
And really, yes, sure, Dennis, please.
I was just going to say, I think what Greg's outlined is a great idea. As you said, you've got the breadth and depth of PhDs, is it masters, is it mini MBAs, is it little micro pieces? And I think also with quality, I always go back to strategic quality. And, I think there's a real opportunity or a need for senior executives who don't have the time to have the expertise in everything, but need to be more open and aware to being educated almost on those on micro things that are happening across the company in terms of here's the capabilities that the organization has in whether it's IT, whether it's in my industry, if it's concrete development or it's sustainability or carbon issues. Just being aware, because yes, you're going to get the feedback throughout the organization in terms of SWOT analysis and where to go and what are we doing strategically and what are new niche markets and all of these things. But as expertise becomes more micro, I think at the general level, CEO level, the managing director type level, they've got to have their fingers in more pies and be more aware of what's actually happening. Where are all of the opportunities? They've got to be educated about these dramatic changes happening within their own organization and industries because things are moving so quickly. So there isn't the time to do a master's degree in something, but there is time to be constantly made aware of what's happening. What are the opportunities that are becoming available?
I'm sometimes wondering if amidst all these changes, we shouldn't focus more on the things that will always be there. If you have an organization and you want to be successful, you will need to have customers. And you will need to be able to give these customers value, the value they're asking for, or you will lose them. And I think, all the other stuff can help you to achieve that better, but at least you can focus on the actual goal that will stay stable. And that can help you, give you a guideline amongst all these changes in seeing, are we going in the right direction? Do we keep our customers happy, yes or no? And if not, what sort of technology maybe do we need to help with that? I don't know.
And I think really just to build on that a little bit, we also have to make sure that we as quality professionals don't get so captured by the tools.
Yeah.
I think we call this a toolkit, people have called it that. And Master Black Belt many places is just technology. And we need to have, on top of that, another one about maybe a quality craftsman. How do you work with the people? How do you craft human collaboration, cooperation, diversity into that system? And then maybe another one beyond that about how are you a management maestro? How do you talk to the executives? How do you get their concerns? And most of the lead technology training in the quality community is very specific to tool. And can I get deeper and deeper into tools? I still remember something Russ Acoff said. And he says, we get better about learning more and more about less and less. And so we can't become microcosms. We have to get this hyper open. We have to see the whole picture. And then we can understand what happens.
Yeah.
And so we have to change our view.
Yeah, I think quality is well placed within an organization because we have contacts everywhere. We should have an overview fundamentally.
I think that we also touch somehow the second question that we have prepared. What do we need to plan both professionally for ASQ and strategically for corporate customers to prepare for changes in the coming decades? Really mention about the flexibility that we have to have and ongoing learning, and we talk about the technological background, so not becoming technical on just that, but mostly to understand the technical languages. Any other insights for you? Dennis, for example, what would be your take on that? Hello?
Dennis, can you still hear us?
Yeah, sorry, it couldn't get mute off there for a moment.
Okay.
Yeah, I think talking about those micro training or micro education, ASQ has something running right now where you're actually providing mini training on elements of lean. You actually get a certificate for each of those little elements. I think maybe that's a little piece that's moving toward the micro education. The professions of the future. It's interesting. Was it CMQE or the old Certified Quality Manager BOQ for ASQ has just been updated. There's a new BOK handbook out. So I think things are moving quicker than we can try to keep up with it a little bit. I personally, I think it's going to be this mix of technology and the humanity aspect. I think just as Willie said, for me, it's about how can we use this technology now to capture and get more real-time feedback and being able to control that. So much of technology at this point has been about the danger of being overwhelmed by the amount of data you have. So can we control that data and get more real-time feedback on the customer and our people? As I was saying earlier, I was surprised that organizations not being sure if certain functions could work remotely and not being sure, frankly, if they could trust their employees to work from home. That actually says an awful lot about how little we knew about our own people and how little we knew about our own processes, and therefore how little do we know about our own clients and our partners. So I think that the profession's going to be much more open to, as Greg said, about what are not just the old tools, but what are the new tools and ways of bringing in that information, finding out how we react. And it's not just reacting, obviously, operationally, but strategically. How do we be more strategically flexible in what we do? We've seen the number of organizations that went from making anything from gates to lawnmowers to suddenly switching to making things like hand sanitizer dispensers and face masks and all sorts of things that we quickly did. Ask those companies literally weeks before that, would you consider, do you think you can adapt quickly? They wouldn't have thought they would have adapted as quickly as they did. So I think there's huge opportunities here, but I think it's all, for me, it's always going to come back to, and I love the way Greg put it, the pursuit of quality of humanity. I think it's not forgetting, and Willie's touched on this too, the fundamentals of quality management, what we're really about and what we're trying to do.
And if I could add on top of this, I want to build a little bit there, because what I hear when you're saying this, Dennis, is we need to think about the culture of the organization. Mm-hmm. And it's also the diversity. How do we deal with different cultures around the world? How do we deal with these collaborations? How do we deal that different cultures have different ways of addressing problems or solving them? None of those are bad. It's not right or wrong. It's just different degrees of approaches. And we have to become more flexible in our thinking about dealing with those things. And I think this is something, so I shouldn't hold up and say, DMAIC, that's the only way to do it, you know, or PDCA or PDSA or something. We have to have a broadened way of thinking about those things. Mm-hmm. And I know that there's some research that's being done at the International Academy for Quality that's going to come out in the next year or so that's going to talk about how do we do this sort of flexible thinking process. And so it's going to be important that we be open to those things and not close ourselves to what is evolving out of this. So the broader view of the world that you and Willie both talked about, we really have to internally accept that that is our responsibility to get people thinking critically about what do we do to drive goodness and prevent the badness.
If I may add a little comment on,
Go ahead, Willie.
In the question that was mentioning of, as a professional organization, ASQ, how would they need to prepare and change? And of course, just like I said, as any organization, give more value to their members in this case. But another issue in my view is that the members of ASQ are very often quality professionals. And I think one thing ASQ should think about is how can I expand this knowledge over a broader area of people than just the people that are designated as quality professionals. Because in the end, having more people involved in quality without having a title or a function, in my view, will be vital for success in the long term.
Yeah, it's interesting just to say, Willie, it's the people that I really connect with and the other colleagues in my business that I connect with, and we're talking on the same level. We've got the same perspective, and we really gel. Are people in risk management, some colleagues in HR and environmental management and safety management, and so we've got a lot of commonality that we're trying to drive towards. When I talk about FMEA, the environmental people 100% get that. The risk management people have a real strategic viewpoint, and they're really focused on the key things we need to be doing to drive improvement. But they would not designate themselves in terms of being a quality professional.
Mm.
Sorry, I will be interrupting this great discussion just for focused questions which I received privately, just to answer some of the attendees' questions, because we just have 8 hours at the end of the session. So there's one question: where do we see the role of various excellence models in Quality 4.0? And in the food industry. There's another question also about the food industry compared to other industries.
Well, I can take, the first cut at that maybe, because I've been implementing for the last 3 or 4 years a program of assistance to the nations in Africa with 5 different nations. It's now expanded to another 3, and it's moving into Laos and Cambodia in the Far East. And the food industry needs to continue its focus on process, agricultural process. They need to focus on quality at the source, cleanliness, healthcare, and all those sorts of things. And the problem is when you get into Africa, for instance, when we were training them in quality and continual improvement, it's like they said, what do you mean? What are you talking about continual improvement? We're doing quality. And I said, well, how do you define quality? We have a checklist, we follow the checklist. And what I realized is that their definition was do work. Do work according to the checklist. Now you're doing quality. It had nothing to do with the outcome. It had nothing to do with the efficiency in the process. So the time in which they did it, as long as they did those items in any order at any rate. And I remember going to a particular water bottling line. It's not high technology, but I saw the masks on the people, so they had their personal protective gear on, but it was hanging off the ear of a person. So another person had the mask on, but they weren't wearing shoes. And so it's just like, okay, what's this process that people have? And so they really had no idea of what the process was. So what had happened was the UN had gone in and said, get certificates. They bought a group of people in, and the checklist got the piece of paper. So they said, okay, we're certified. Now we can ship food to Europe. And there's no wonder we've had some E. coli outbreaks when I take a look at that. I took a look at the purification processes, and they're using rainwater for washing the fruit, and the rainwater has the chemicals in it and all the crap and fertilizer. That's not getting the fruit clean. It's just distributing the dirt someplace else. And so we really have to get sound understanding of basics in food safety. We have to continue that. They have to have education in what packaging is working, what is ecologically sound for the environment, not plastics and so forth. A number of these nations in Africa I've been at have outlawed plastics. You can't use plastic bags and so forth. So I think that there's some progressiveness there. And when it comes to the excellence models, I think we've had too many. Okay, I was involved in the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award, setting up the first set of criteria back in the late 1980s. My boss is one of the 123 quality directors who were brought together to say, can you agree on what excellence is? And basically, that was just a very generic model. And when I was then vice president of quality at Xerox, we had ranked Xerox, and they wanted to apply for the new European Quality Organization. And that was the first year they won it, but they won it with a model we created that had nothing to do with EFQM. It had nothing to do with the Malcolm Baldrige Quality Award. We called it business excellence. And guess what? That took off because they became a role model. When Nokia mobile phones won the highest level of points on the European Quality Award ever, 840 points coming out of consensus. I know of nobody who's ever done it any better, at least I haven't heard of it. And we did not have any excellence model. We had a 5-point internal model that we bolted on to the management review process of the performance measures and project work and so forth. And so it just so happened we designed it in a way that met those criteria. They were used as an example or framework, yes, but not the exact questions. So it wasn't about dotting every I, crossing every T, and now you've got excellence. It was about, can you get it into the minds and hearts of people, not just into their hands. So it's not just in one part of their brain, like the nether brain of the reptilian brain, but in the mammalian brain, where they actually have creative thought happening and engage them in becoming excited In Japan, they define motivation as building the enthusiasm in the workers for the quality of their work. And I like that definition, because do we actually have workers who are enthusiastic? So George, you know the root word for enthusiasm, it comes out of the Greek, entheos, to be filled with God, or the Spirit of God. You have this higher calling for what you're doing. I think that this is one of the things we have to think about. Someone else, please.
Well, just on the EFQM, the new model has just come out, and they're obviously not silver bullets. They're not the end all. But it is interesting that the new EFQM model has a particular focus on being more dynamic. It has a focus on disruptive management, and also it's asset-based, where an organization literally connects into the asset-based framework or platform. It can upload and keep its information available. It can share it within the organization, and it essentially allows a virtual or real-time remote evaluation or examination from the assessors when they're doing an evaluation. So I think the EFQM model has taken a real leap, both with the criteria itself and how it functions and how you actually interact with the model itself.
Well, I think it can work very good as a source of inspiration, and getting up new ideas. There's nothing wrong in that. Personally, I have a bit of a problem with the word excellence, but that's a personal problem, because it sounds to me too much as a sort of an end goal, whereas we know there is no end goal. When you're excellent, you have to go beyond excellence, and then that's the new excellence. And that's why I don't like the word too much, because it sounds, as I said, too much as a sort of an end goal, which is not there. I like Ann Kent from VCK, her statement on quality is, tomorrow we would like to be better than today, which is not a bad one. But it's just a personal issue I have with the word excellence in that respect. But of course, there's great stuff in that. The risk you always have is, well, actually creating another checklist. But then a checklist of the questions of a model, and yeah, I'm always a little bit afraid of that. It's very important to keep thinking within your organization, what does all of this mean to me, and how can I put it into practice, rather than turning it into a checklist.
If I can comment on your excellence comment, I remember the conversation where they switched from the European Quality Award to excellence. And it was precisely this thing that we want to have the results, emphasize the result. Excellence is the result. But as you say, it's a moving result. And the movement away from quality came because the reaction of many executives was, quality is a diminishing thing. That's what they do in the workplace. I don't do quality. And my question to an executive who says that is, don't you care about the quality of your resources? Don't you care about giving a payback to your investors? You care about quality, but you define it differently. And you don't work with your hands, you work with your heads, and the quality of your thinking probably has a bigger impact on the quality of this organization than what any worker is doing with their hands. And so, yes, you should care about quality, and you want to ratchet up the degrees of outcome. But as you say, quality is a process. Excellence is a level that's achieved. And in systems engineering, you have two types of measures. You've got rates of change, that's a quality metric, and then you've got levels. And in systems engineering, you learn in measurement theory that you can't have both of them at once, because the excellence is what happens between two measurement systems, and the way you get from one to the other is the rate of change. And so you basically have stagnated once you start talking about a level. Now you're talking about history already. So you want to make sure you know the direction that you're moving in after that. So that's where that discussion came, just to fill in the blanks.
Thank you.
Yes, Nancy, maybe we can take another one question, because we are just...
yeah, we already exceeded, the 8. But please, if anyone wants to ask, let me see what questions came in. I think there was more comments. There's a question: how do we overcome conservatives in the mindset of members of top management whose support will be indispensable in proposing new approach in this pandemic period? You can take this last question.
Well, I basically work mostly for executives. And so what I have done is I've actually created 22 workshops to send them through to teach them what they need to know about quality. It's not anything that's in any training program today. You know, so they have to learn about measurements. What does that mean? It's not about quality, cost, and time. They have to understand what is flow, what is a decision point, what is a control point, how do we hold people responsible for decisions? So they don't learn about RACI, they learn about everybody coming to a meeting has a role, they have a measure, they have an objective, and they have individuals and group measurements and objectives. And how do you have the conflicts in there so they can start understanding how do all those things actually operate collectively? It's a different learning process. It's a different learning objective for the executives. And we can't make the mistake of saying, okay, all executives have to have yellow belt or green belt training, because that's not what they need to know. They're not going to be the hands-on workers. They're the heads-on workers, if you will.
I think maybe we can, thank you, Dr. Greg. We can take one last question because it's very specific about Africa, but I would like to remind everybody, please, before we wrap up the session, we have a feedback link, which I put in the chat. Please, would like to hear your feedback about the session. The question is, considering the state of infrastructures and the prevailing technology realities, how could Africa be properly assessed and quality progress measured under the concept of pandemics? Any suggestions for Africa?
I really don't know of anything. I expect there might be something happening through the African Union, which does a pretty good job of addressing the cross-African cultural issues. And I know the man who runs the African Union Standards Program. He's a very intelligent man and he's very capable. But I don't have any visibility of what they're actually doing or how they're doing it today. So I don't know. Good question, though.
So
I don't know either, but I'll try to add just one comment. I think fundamentally, looking at how you evolve, and of course the situations are different, but it's not so much where you are as where you go to. So it's a journey towards better. If you can measure that and you can see that happening, you can work from there. You know, it's not where you are, it's where you're going, and I think that's one thing to keep in mind. Are we progressing, and how can we measure progress? But that's of course a very general answer to a very specific question. So
and the comment I'll make is obviously couching everything within what Greg said and what he said about models, excellence models. I know there's the African excellence model, and one of the nice things about that is it's, and I think it's a key thing in quality, and what we're doing in this discussion today is the quality community across countries coming together to look at best practices and ways of working together and creating solutions for the future. I think that's a key thing.
Anything you would like to say before we wrap up the session?
Well, if people have questions, they can always send them through. That's no problem. My mail.
Nancy, thank you for organizing this. This is a very stimulating discussion. I'm sure that the people who've been watching the panelists talk, and Giorgio, what you've been doing and coordinating has been very excellent. So hats off to a well-run Asia or EMEA ASQ event.
Thank you very much, Dr. Greg. Thanks, everybody. Dennis, okay. Greg, Georgios, thank you very much for your support and for leading this discussion. Thank you all for your great input. I'm sure, I mean, attendees have more questions, but definitely they can send them to me and I can share it with you. And we do hope to see you again in future events. Just a quick update, we have one gathering for our members in Europe and another one for Middle East and Africa, virtual gatherings on April 15 and May 21. I will be sending emails to everybody. So again, thanks everybody, and stay safe, and we will hopefully we'll connect again soon. Thanks everybody. Our attendees, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. Bye everyone. Stay safe.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.